Okay, we're here with Jake Burns talking about Now Then. Now Then basically is an album that some fans love, some fans don't particularly. It's always a mixed reviews and stuff.
Yeah.
Starts with Falling Down. You've got a change of drummer, Jim out and Dolphin in. Tell us about Now Then.
Well, yeah, I mean, the change of drummer had happened slightly before that, because obviously we did the £1.10 or less EP with Dolph. So we were pretty well together as a unit by the time we went in to do it. Yeah, I mean, I can understand why it's a mixed bag, because it is as a record. We were actually starting to pull in different directions, and the band wasn't the sort of coherent, happy ship that it had been up to that point. Mainly because times had changed, and audiences had changed, audience expectations had changed, and I think we were a bit adrift. It was around the time of the whole New Romantic thing, and therefore sort of traditional guitar bands were having a pretty hard time of it. Like I said, audiences were dwindling, and it was just becoming a bit of a slog really to do, to be honest. And things that would have been resolved before with just like a discussion became huge arguments, and I think we all took our eye off the ball a bit, really. Right. Having said that, I think that when the record is good, it's very good. But equally, I think it probably has some of the among some of the worst stuff that we've done as well. Not the absolute worst, but there's some stuff on there that I wouldn't be overly keen to put myself through again.
Right. So Falling Down
Was actually, again, one of the songs I actually did like a lot. Very heavily U2 influenced in both the guitars and the drums department, because they were about the only guitar band at the time that were doing anything worthwhile and exciting, and therefore I drew on that. The lyric was, again, in common with a lot of the band's lyrics, the result of a conversation with a fan. And we'd spotted this particular girl turning up at quite a few of the concerts, and she seemed to be getting more and more battered as the tour went on. And we were talking to her, and it turned out that she'd effectively run away from home. Right. And was following run away to join the circus kind of thing, and was following the band around. And we did say to, I mean, this wasn't the first time this had happened, not with this particular girl, but with fans in the past. And we did what we always did, which was sit her down and say, do your parents know where you are? Are they concerned about you? You really ought to phone them, and you ought to consider going home, basically. And tried to talk her into going back and being sensible about the whole thing, which I believe she eventually did. And she turned up, on a later tour, much happier, healthier, and not hating us forever for being a bit nannying and sending her home.
Right. I've always wanted to say this. The next track's called Won't Be Told. So what is it, Jake? What is it you won't be told?
Well, anything really. Basically, this song's about making your own mistakes and finding your own way in life. And it really is one of those things. It's almost like, well, he's got to learn for himself, and it's being allowed the freedom to do that. I think that while it's not a bad thing that parents be overly protective, because God knows the world isn't an easy or particularly safe place. By the same token, you only learn not to fall over and skin your knees once you've done it a couple of times, and you've got to be allowed a certain amount of freedom and a certain amount of leeway to make your own mistakes, because it doesn't really matter how many times somebody says to you, if you stick your hand in the fire, it's going to hurt. You never really believe until you actually stick your hand in the fire, and then you damn well don't do it again. So it's one. That's the thinking behind the song, is that you've got to be allowed to grow up on your own. You've got to be allowed to make your own mistakes.
Right. The next track on the album, I've got my little story on, which is Love of the Common People. My brother was 2 years below me at school, and one of me and one of the lads had written Stiff Little Fingers on the school yard wall in silver paint.
Vandal.
It had been 2 years worth of fading, and then of course when they were at school, Paul Young took Love of the Common People to number one, and number two, indeed, top 10 hit with it. And this girl said to my brother, "Oh yes, Stiff Little Fingers. Aren't they that band that wrote Paul Young's hit?"
God, I wish. I wish. No, we took it again. It was the grand tradition of Stiff Little Fingers taking a really good pop reggae song and kicking the living daylights out of it. It was originally a hit for a guy called Nicky Thomas in, I think, 1970, 72, something like that. And again, a song I'd always really, really liked. And obviously Paul and myself hit on the same idea of recording it at the same time. And when we started the tour in support of the Now Then album, the Out of Our Skulls tour, we started in Dunstable. And Paul was from that neck of the woods. He was from Luton direction, and he came to the first gig. I mean, we were already friends by that stage. Like I said on the last album, you know, we'd worked with the Q-Tips horn section, and obviously Paul was their singer, so we were all old chums by then. And Paul turned up at the gig and actually said to me backstage, he said, "You know that Love of the Common People song?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Are you thinking of releasing that as a single?" I said, "No, not at all." No. And he said, "Well, you don't mind if I do?" I went, "Go ahead. You know, you never get anywhere with that, mate. You know, yeah, number 2, that'll teach me." You know.
The next one was a single for you guys. It's was your last single of the first run, called "Price of Admission."
Yeah.
Boys, girls, and things. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's the usual hypocritical nonsense that, you know, permeates in a lot of relationships. Whereas, you know, if a guy goes out and sleeps with a lot of women, then he's a bit of a boy and, you know, a bit of a rake and all that. Whereas if a woman does it, then she's just no slut and a slapper. Right. And it's that basic dishonesty that, you know, that does actually still exist in, like I said, in a lot of people's lives. And it just didn't make sense to me. And I felt that no matter what way you ran at it, there was still going to be a price to pay for either being honest about it or being dishonest about it. And I talked it through with Gordon, and he felt exactly the same, and he came up with the lyric, and I'd sort of written this. It was the first ever ballad that we wrote, right? Which is, you know, a bizarre thing to be talking about in terms of a punk rock band, but I think that also exemplified where we were at when we came to make this record, because we felt we had to stretch our wings a bit, and our audience at the time wasn't willing to accept that.
Right.
And I mean, you know, to a degree, we get that from some sections of the audience even today. You know, there are those that turn up and only want to hear song material and nothing else. Not as many as there were then, but you know, there are still that element to the audience, and you know, I'm not at all ashamed of those songs, and I'm very happy to play them. But that's not all there is to the band, and that's what I felt then. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that led to the breakup, was that I'm better equipped to deal with that kind of reality now than I was then. And yeah, I mean, Price of Admission and a later song, Big City Night, tend to highlight that, you know, we were thinking and moving in different directions than our audience was, or indeed our audience wanted to let us.
Yeah, indeed. The next track, it was the B-side of the single, and is the next track on the album, Touch and Go. And as we've said before, within the realms of Price of Admission is almost like variations on a theme, isn't it?
It's the same thing, yeah. I mean, it's basically the whole one night stand thing. You know, wherein it's kind of like saying that there's nothing wrong in having a one night stand, you know, as long as nobody gets hurt and you're both consenting adults, and that's what you want to do at the time. Because, you know, that particular ignition of that flame and that one night of passion or whatever does mean something to the people involved. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily need to be sort of tawdry, seamy, and, you know, whatever. It can stand alone, you know, as if you like, a sort of a very, very short love affair on its own. I mean, it doesn't have to be, like I said, yes, it doesn't have to be tawdry or seamy or underhand at all.
The next track on the album is one of my personal favourites on this album. It's called Stands to Reason, and is, for me anyway, is a very, very honest song. It's almost, this is your life, get on with it, basically. Yeah,
I mean, this is a strange song, because it was one that Dolph wrote the music to, and I think it was the first thing he brought to us. And it was a strange collaboration between himself, Gordon, and I mean to a much lesser extent my input. My input was basically the weird underwater guitar sound thing, but it was a good song because it was almost the natural successor to Closed Groove, which I know isn't my favourite SLF song by any stretch of the imagination, but it was that whole blinkered. We're back to and we've done this a few times. The guy in the pub who knows all, i.e. fuck all, but is going to convince you that he's absolutely right and you're completely wrong. And look, it's without dropping into mock cockney, but it's bleeding obvious, mate, isn't it? Nah, mate, are you an idiot or what?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's that kind of small closed mind thing, as in, it's bleeding obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it did, yeah. I mean, it was. I thought it was a really good lyric and a really interesting musical approach for the band to take. Because again, we're back to us trying to stretch the boundaries of what we had done previously. Because again, so the musically and the arrangement of it weren't your straight 1, 2, 3, 4. Last one at the bar buys the drinks.
Yeah. The next track, and I mean, this is just a generational thing. This was the other side of the single, was Bits of Kids. And it's pretty much it's kind of, I went to school with people who were effectively bits of kids. I'm sure everybody did of that generation. Tell us about it.
Well, it's my favourite track on the record. And I still think it's a very, very underrated song in what we do. It was written about the whole latchkey kids phenomenon, wherein both parents were forced through financial strictures to have to go out and work. And, while it was traditionally the role of, your mum would be there at lunchtime when you came home from school to give you a bowl of soup and a sandwich or whatever and pack you back to school in the afternoon, that just wasn't happening for a lot of kids. And more of them were coming home and letting themselves in and, risking burning the house down, trying to fend for themselves. It came about through Gordon's girlfriend, who's a school teacher, and she would come home and tell us these stories. And they were just, a lot of them were really heartbreaking, sort of single mothers trying to make ends meet, and the fact that they were getting next to no support. In fact, we're almost being frowned upon, almost still, almost that sort of, oh my, God, she got married out of wedlock. That's disgraceful. It was almost this medieval bloody attitude to people, and it was the kids that were suffering. And I think it's a very direct and in a way obvious lyric, but it's all the more powerful because of that.
The next one is the Dolphin Does Ringo, the singing drummer.
Singing drummer. Well, again, God love Dolph. This isn't his fault. I was supposed to sing it, and we're back to my doing this in the wrong bloody key again. Although Dolph did write the music, I assured him all the way through rehearsals that no, it won't be a problem. I can get up there. Not with a stepladder and a bungee, mate. That is not a chance. So it was once we actually got into the studio and we'd recorded the backing track, and I went in and tried to sing it, and it was just it sounded like a man with a hernia. It was useless. And so Dolph was unfortunately press ganged into doing it, much against his will, but I think he did a very good job on it. So.
Well, that was Welcome to the Whole Week. The next one is called Big City Nights, and we've gone from singing drummer to talking rhythm guitarist.
Guitar player,
yeah.
Henry's Lee Marvin impression. Again, I was really surprised when Henry came up with this, because up to this point, Henry had been the guy who wrote the Ramones songs, and he suddenly comes out with this thing that's got like jazz chords in the chorus, and I'm like, really? Oh, okay. And it's totally the opposite of the Henry songs on the previous record, wherein he played, and I think Gordon played, whether it was sort of consciously or unconsciously or whatever, on Henry's sort of, joie de vivre and being the Mr. Bonhomie all the time. This was a very sort of dark, almost scared song. But again, with, I think, probably the most sort of musical chorus that Henry's ever written. I think that the actual melody on the chorus is really, really pretty. And, again, he kind of had to act the song rather than sing it. And, he's not an actor. And I think he did, did a creditable job on it.
Yeah. Talkback's big. Talkback to me is the album's silver lining. It's a big production number and kind of. So what's Talkback?
Well, it's the usual sort of, your mum and dad know best again. It's that sort of thing, none of your back chat, all that sort of stuff. Talkback came about. I'd tell you, interestingly, how it actually happened was I'd always maintained throughout my entire songwriting career that the thing that triggered me and helped me write, if I could get a really strong title. If I had a really strong title, I maintained I could write a song. And we were on tour in France at the time, and I was talking to our guitar tech at the side of the stage, and he was also a songwriter. And I was chatting to him. We were literally due to go on, and they were sort of like quiet in the crowd down and about to roll the intro tape. And he said, I don't understand how you do that. I said, no. And I was looking round. I said, if I have a really strong title, I said, for example, there on the monitor desk, there was a channel marked Talkback, which is obviously how the monitor engineer talks to the sound engineer out front, and they swap, oh no, hang on, can you turn the bass up a bit, that sort of thing. Yeah. I said, for example, Talkback, right, that's going to be a big, brassy, kind of jam-sounding rock song. And he went, no, it's not. I said, yes, it is, I'll write it. And did. And that's what it sounds like. Because I knew that's what it would sound like just from the title.
Delivered to name. And then finally, is that what you fought the war for?
Yeah, it's kind of the flip side to Tin Soldiers. It's the big crashing finale to the album, but it's also... it was, again, the album was written around coming towards the end of the first Thatcher government. And while they were very keen on being very sort of gung-ho British and imperial, if you looked around the country at the time, there wasn't a lot of evidence of the home fit for heroes that people had been promised in the past. And it was a bit, it struck us as sort of obviously ironic that is this really what what was in the brochure at the time? So is that what you fought the war for? Was the obvious line to go down, although it was 40 years hence. But had things really improved that much, or given that things had improved in the interim, i.e. the welfare state and all that, which was suddenly being eroded and chipped away at, surely that was what you fought the war for. That was what you wanted, was a better country, a better life for everyone, not just for the select few. So that's kind of where the song came from. Just as a quick aside, if we've got time to get it in, it also was the first time we used timpanis on a record, because we wanted that big sort of dramatic Dam Busters type drum roll for the middle section. And not being a tub thumper myself, I had no idea how these things were tuned. And I just thought it was the screws around the top, the nuts around the top that actually sort of tightened it up, got the tension right all the way. Because I'd seen Dolph do it. Yeah. He was out there tapping all right there, dung 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 dung, right around the top, tightening it all up so it all surface tension was all even, and it was set to the note. Well, I thought it was a bit like tuning a guitar. That was it set, and these things come with a pedal at the bottom, which actually do have the notes written on them.
Right.
So, this was set to E, which is what we needed, and he had a second set to D, because he went from one down, so it went brrr, brrr. That was the deal. And every time I came back in from doing a keyboard overdub, I thought it was the funniest thing on the planet to hit this thing and stand on the pedal. So it would go boing. I thought this was great fun. I had no idea that meant you had to retune the whole feckin' drum every time. And it was only when sort of Dolph was like tearing his hair out and screaming that these things be sent back because they were defective because they couldn't hold their fucking tuning for more than 5 seconds. And I walked past and did this, and he suddenly stopped mid-rant and looked at me and went, have you been doing that all album? I went, well, yeah, it's funny, isn't it? He went, you bastard, and flew at me across the studio, ready to sort of string me up by the thumbs.
And that's now then, and thanks once again, Jay.
No problem.